What's up everybody, good to see you. Welcome back to Tekin Builds. My name is Ty Campbell and we are moving right into part number 2 of our Axial UMG10 build. Last week we made really good progress getting our general frame assembled with our transmission installed. We got our axles put together and they are loaded with beef tubes, Vanquish gears, Vanquish shock and link mounts, and RC four-wheel drive portal axles. So these are not your mama's AR44s. This week we are going to just truck right along into getting our suspension done. So we're going to assemble those Icon shocks. We're also going to build those aluminum suspension links and get those all ready to go on the vehicle. And we are going to mount up our Vanquish methods with our MT45 tires. Once we get all that stuff out of the way, we're going to move right on into our electronics. We are going to install our T360 steering servo, our BXR Element Proof speed control, wire this thing up, throw a receiver in, and we're going to set everything up so that we have a ready to run chassis. Once all that stuff's out of the way, we are going to move into that body. That's a huge project. I'm sort of looking forward to that, but painting is not really my favorite activity, so we'll see where that goes. Let's get right to it. We're going to assemble our icons and get our suspension links put together. These are all the parts we're going to need to assemble our aluminum suspension links. So you're going to need obviously the links themselves. These links are super easy to put together. It only takes a couple minutes. We're going to bust out our skill power driver and drive these M4 all threads into our link ends after we cut those off. This is the parts tree that you'll need. It's got a really sweet little ammo box accessory right here, and long horns if you're from Texas or you're a Texas fan. We've got some wire management clips here, and then these are all of our link ends. Here we've got all of the balls that will pop into the link ends, so make sure you hang on to these. We're gonna need all of these for all of our links. That's all the parts. Let's throw these together real quick and we can move on and get our shocks done. The skill driver I like to use for projects like this is a Skill IXO. It's really cheap, under 40 bucks. You can find it online, and it's lithium powered. I've had this one for close to 10 years now and it's still trucking along. So we're going to use that and a shock rod end holder tool to put the M4 all threads in, and then we're going to screw those assemblies onto our actual links. With our front links fully assembled, we're going to go ahead and put the tie rod in between the steering knuckles. This is what links your two knuckles together. The steering link attaches over here on the right side of the axle, and the panhard bar goes right behind that on a mount on the RC four-wheel drive portals. This is what keeps your axle from swaying side to side. Now that we've got all of our axle links assembled, we're going to put the top link on, and there's only 3 on this front one because the panhard bar is the 4th link. And the lower 2 links screw right into our Vanquish shock mounts. Now on the rear axle, we're going to put the 2 upper links in, and make sure that you angle these properly as per the manual, and then drop the rear links into the Vanquish shock mounts. Well, that's the link project all wrapped up. That was not hard at all. Using a driver and a little rod end holder tool like I was using really speeds up the process and it keeps you from killing your fingers. Use pliers to pop those balls in. Make sure you orient these top and bottom links properly. The longer set go on the bottom, those are your bottom 4. The middle length are your top ones. Each one has to have a bent link end at the axle side outward and a bent link end at the chassis side that bends upward, so pay attention to those links. That's it. Now we're going to go ahead and bust open our shock bag and put our Icon shocks together real quick. Well, here we go. This is all of the parts laid out to build our Icon shocks from Axial. And these shocks are really simple. It may look like a lot of parts, but everything has its place. Obviously, we have the shock cap up here that the faux piggyback screws onto. We've got the cap O-ring to keep any of the shock oil from leaking out. We've got the main shock body right here. We've got our thumb adjuster screw here to change the ride height of our vehicle. The tinitride coated shock shafts, the cartridge seals and spacer. This is the shock piston that will go on top of our shaft, cartridge cap, the springs, spring retainers, and the shock rod ends. So I'm going to show you how to build one of these real quick. We'll fill it up with some oil and bleed it, and then we'll do that for the other 3, and they'll all 4 be ready to go on our truck. So we're going to start with the main shock body, and we're going to put those cartridge seals in the bottom. So you put the upper seal in, followed by the spacer that goes between the two seals, and then the lower seal. I like to drop some oil in here so these are lubed when we put the shaft through so we don't tear anything, and then we'll screw that cartridge cap on. Next part is the thumb adjusting washer for the ride height or the preload. Then we'll put our piggyback on our shock cap, drop that seal in there, make sure it fully seats down. Next, we're going to put the bottom E-clip on our shock shaft. This is what holds our shock piston in, and the piston is responsible for the damping action of our shock. We'll lube up that shaft and pop it through the shock body. Next, we screw on the rod end for the bottom of the shock shaft, and then we fill it up with oil. Leave a little bit of space, about 5 to 8 millimeters of gap. These are an emulsion shock, so there is supposed to be a little bit of air in them. You'll notice there's no bladder in the lid. Screw the cap on, check the shock action, and make sure that the shaft can fully compress and that it's not packing out, otherwise you might blow seals. Then we can put the spring on, followed by the lower spring cup, and secure it with the included screw to the rod end. Well, that's a little crash course in shock assembly for you. Like I said, these are super easy. You want to make sure you lube the O-rings inside that lower cartridge before putting the shaft through, and also lube up the shock shaft so that you don't tear the O-rings when you're pushing the threaded part through. I'm going to go ahead and assemble and oil the other three. I just went with the factory 30 weight oil because this truck's going to be pretty lightweight with all the super small running gear that we're putting in it. We'll see how that works. I might end up around 40 or 50, but we're going to play with it once we get it out on the rocks. So let's knock these other three shocks out. We'll get them ready to go on our truck. So we are ready to throw our axles on our chassis, but before we do that, just to make things easier so that we can reach everything, we're going to install our Tekin T360 steering servo. Now, some people ask, why the 360? Why not the 440, Ty? Well, I just don't feel like I need upwards of 450 plus ounces of torque in a truck like this. The T360 is going to give us 345 ounces of torque at 6 volts. Now that's real torque, not dynamic torque. We give both ratings on the website and on the back of the box, so we're as transparent as possible. Dynamic torque are those inflated ratings that you see that are about 100 ounces higher than the real torque numbers. Now, dynamic torque is the number you're going to see when you first slam the servo into the testing device, and you're going to see a spike in what it can pull, and then that's going to drop. Real torque numbers on this servo, plenty for a 1/9 scaler, especially with as lightweight as this is going to be. I don't need to move rocks with this thing. That 360 is a stout enough servo. I've had great success with it in all of my other scale trucks, and I leave the 440 for the bigger 2.2 heavier trucks. We've got everything we need here. The flat top screws that are going to mount our 360 into the chassis, and then there's these sweet little wire clips right here. I love how there's so much wire management built into this chassis. It's really going to clean this thing up. You're probably not even going to be able to see my wiring by the time we're done. We'll get to that in a little bit. Right now, let's pop this servo in, and then we'll move on with getting our axles and our shocks on. So to mount our servo, we're going to flip it so that the wire and the spline are facing the front of the truck. And it's just 4 screws. Make sure you get those little wire retainer clips in there. These are real handy for holding the servo receiver wire. And then there's also a nice little channel in that boat side that routes the wire down the frame rail, and it really tucks it away and fits it right up into the receiver box. So now our servo's mounted in our chassis. We will fire it up when we have everything wired up so that we can center it and do some of the initial programming. Now it's time to link up our axles and put our shocks on. Now that our axles are all linked up, we just have to put the drive shaft half on this side so that they will fit into the female side of the drive shaft on the transmission. We're going to Loctite those grub screws so they don't fall out while we're out driving. And then to install the axle, I like to lay the chassis upside down and then lay the axle and all the links on top. I start by putting the drive shaft in, then we'll do the panhard bar mount, followed by the lower links, and then we'll do that upper link. Rear axle is the same. Plug the shaft in, secure our lower links, and hook up our upper links. With everything tight, We flip her back over, make sure that the suspension movement is nice and free and there's no binding anywhere, and then we're gonna put our shocks on. Each shock is just 2 screws, a top on the shock tower and a bottom on the lower shock and link mount on the axle. Now that our shocks are all on and everything's linked, feels nice and free, really happy with that. All right, we're making killer progress. We now have a slider. We've got our suspension and our axles on. Everything's nice and smooth. What's a slider, you ask? Well, it's a really delicious little sandwich. No, not a sandwich, it's this. It's a slider because it isn't rolling anywhere without wheels and tires on it. We're gonna put those together and then we'll have a roller. So let's bust out our Vanquish methods and our MT45s. We'll show you how to mount those up on a 3-piece bead lock like the method we've got here, and then we'll get them bolted on. Now we're gonna mount up our MT45s on our new Incision method wheels by Vanquish. These come with hubs. They're a 3-piece bead lock design, full aluminum, comes with all the hardware. These are real easy to put together. We're gonna use the stock foams in these tires because this truck is such a lightweight truck. I just wanna see how these tires react with that stock foam. We might end up putting some tuning discs from Proline or Crawler Innovations, or just changing the foams out completely in the future. I just wanna see how these perform. Before we mount these up, we are actually going to punch 2 holes in the center of the tread down in between our lugs. And we're gonna do that with this leather punch right here. What that's gonna do is let air escape out of the tire, and because this truck is light, that's gonna let the tire squish and conform over the top of obstacles, giving us better traction. It is gonna let water in. I don't drive in a whole lot of water myself, and if I do, I just pop those wheels and tires apart and let the foams dry out for a day or 2. So I'll show you how to mount one of these up real quick. We'll bang the other ones out and then we'll bolt them up on our truck. First thing we gotta do is get this foam out of the tire so we can punch our holes. Like I said, we're gonna punch them 180 degrees opposite from each other. This will also let water get out if any gets in. Then we can shove that foam back in there. Then on our wheel, we need to take the rear ring hardware out, pop everything apart, stuff that center ring down in there, and then put the wheel face in, and you'll hear it kind of pop down in there. Then you want to get that rear ring centered over the holes, start putting your hardware in, and then tighten it down kind of in a star pattern so that you're not pulling any side of the tire down too quickly or you risk debeading. Well, that's one wheel and tire done. Air is escaping just like we want it to. That was super easy, only took a couple of minutes. I'm gonna throw the rest of the hub bolts inside this one. We'll build the other 4 and then we'll bolt up 4 of them on our truck and get it rolling. It's the last one. Now we're gonna throw them on our truck, and we need to put the wheel hexes on real quick. So we'll do that and then we'll bolt these guys on. So now we need to throw our hexes on real quick. We just stick the axle pin through the stub axle, put a little thread lock on that set screw, drop it into the wheel hex, then slide that onto the stub axle and crank that grub screw down. Then we can pop our wheel and tire assembly on and lock it down with a 7mm lock nut. I'm really looking forward to running these tires. I love the tread pattern. It's a very military kind of design, and the compound feels nice and sticky too. This should give us pretty good grip in all conditions. Like I said, really looking forward to trying it out. That's the last one, and check that out. I mean, just look at the axle clearance we've got going on here. That thing is way up off the ground, and these are like a small 1.9 tire. I really like where this is headed. We've got great clearance under our belly skid and our axle pumpkins. Now that that project is out of the way, we can dive into our electronics. We're gonna get our BXR Micro ESC installed, soldered up to our motor, throw a receiver in there, set up our servo. We'll have this thing ready to run. That is it for me today though. We're gonna finish up those electronics tomorrow. What a day. Now that I'm all coffeeed up, we're going to install our BXR microbrush speed control in our Unimog. Now, this speed control is super awesome. It is big performance in a little package, just under 1-inch square footprint, only weighs 11 grams with the wires included in that weight, so it's super light, it's small. You can put it just about anywhere you want to inside your truck. And when I say this thing is small, I mean it's small. Look at this. This is a quarter right here. So this thing is barely bigger than a quarter. So it's small, but it's got big performance. It will run down to a 20-turn 540 3-slot brushed motor on 2S and down to a 30-turn on 3S. It's got a 5-volt, 3.7 amp internal BEC. It is also element proof, so you don't have to worry about water. And it also has our active drag technology inside, along with an extra receiver wire that goes to your receiver for your 3rd channel drag brake adjustment. And there's a video on the Tekin Clinic on how to set that up. It is exactly the same as it is on this speed control as it is on the RX4 in that video, but go check that out. That'll show you how to set it up on a Spektrum radio. This feature is awesome. It lets you adjust the drag brake in 10 steps from your transmitter, because your drag brake is never really perfect for every situation, so we give you a little bit of versatility with this ESC. This is everything that's in the box. We've got our manual, we've got some double-sided tape, zip ties, the power capacitor. Make sure you install this. It voids your warranty if you don't, and you really need it to absorb ripple current between the ESC and your battery, or things can go boom. And then we've also got some 14 gauge wire strands. 14 gauge is more than enough for this setup. It's gonna let us route everything nice and clean and be easier to solder on these small posts. That is everything cool about the BXR micro brushed crawler controller. We're gonna throw it in our truck and get it soldered up now. Well, it's a pretty tight fit, but I did manage to stuff the BXR down inside the receiver box on the Axial kit. So I think that's gonna fit pretty good. And then I think what I'm gonna do is just take my Spektrum receiver, I'll plug everything in, and we'll run it upside down, about like so, and put our lid on. If I can have everything hidden in there, great. Makes it even more clean and just gives that speed control an added layer of protection. First thing I like to do is coil up these receiver wires just so they're nice and tidy. It makes it easier to tuck. We'll bust out our soldering iron and start soldering up our leads. We'll do the motor leads first. Soldering is one of those things that you get better the more you practice it, so use a little bit of solder, don't use too much. It makes it a little harder to get the joints to flow evenly, and you can risk getting cold solder joints. Now that we've got our motor leads soldered up, we can plug our receiver plugs into our receiver so that we can tuck that down into the box, and then we'll put our battery leads on. Make sure you get plus to plus, minus to minus. So everything's soldered up, looks good. It's gonna be tricky tucking all that down into that box, but I'll get it all in there. I already bound up my receiver and radio, so right now we are gonna do a calibrate on the ESC. This will let it know where neutral, full signal, and full reverse signals are. I'm gonna press and hold the mode button. It'll look for neutral first, should find it. Now we do full throttle. And then we pull full reverse. Let go and it should arm. So now we are ready to go. Looks like the rotation is backwards because of our portal boxes, so I'm gonna swap the 2 wires on the brushed motor real quick. That'll flip the motor direction, and we'll tuck all this down into the box, and then we can set up our servo and we'll be ready to go. So to get our horn on, we just need to take this pan hard bar out of the way real quick. That'll give us the clearance that we need. We'll want to do this with the servo on and get the horn on as center as possible, and then we can drop that screw down in there to hold it on. And you can trim it in your radio, and you can also set center wherever you want to through the hot wire. Now we can replace our pan hard bar and check our servo throws, both left and right. Make sure that they're not binding either direction, and if they are, you're going to want to go into travel or endpoint adjustments and back them off. So this direction was pretty good. I backed it down a little bit. This one, you can see it's tweaking the suspension, so we got to back the travel out until we're not hitting those physical stops. And that is it. Everything is installed. This truck is ready to run. Well, we're making a lot more awesome progress on this rig. We got our servo installed and set up. We got our motor in there, and we've got our BXR speed control installed along with our Spektrum SR315 3-channel receiver. hooked it up to a DX5C, and everything runs beautifully, so that's awesome. I'm getting super excited to get outside and drive this thing. There's a bunch of snow outside, but I don't even care. We're gonna have to take a road trip, probably about an hour, either direction, north or south. We'll figure that out and get out of the snow so we can get some wheel time on this thing very soon. Next week, we are gonna start working on that huge project of a body. We're gonna paint it, we're gonna detail the interior, we're going to put a wrap on from SOR Graphics, and then we'll get everything all assembled and mounted on our truck, get our bumpers on there, and we'll have pretty much a finished product. So if you're having a good time with this episode, click that like button, share it with your friends so they can check it out as well, and subscribe to the Tekin channel so you don't miss out on future builds like this and the next couple episodes wrapping this one up. I'm Ty Campbell, thanks for watching.